Hello, everyone. This is Coach Aaron Saft and the MR Runningpains podcast. And as promised from my last episode, I recorded with John Goldfield about the Madiera 112K. And let me just start by saying John is tremendous. He's just enthusiastic, positive. I love just talking with John because after the conversation, he's one of those people you just feel better. So I hope you leave this conversation feeling the same way. Really cool to hear about Madiera. It is one of those ones that, on an offshoot, sometimes you hear about it. Obviously when Courtney won it and Jim Walmsley won it, it's, we hear about it a little bit more, but sounds like it's a race that's worth visiting and putting on our bucket lists. So let's hear from John, and I'll come back on afterwards and catch up with you guys. Until then, enjoy. All right, here we are, John Goldfield, the legend. Here he is, it's right in front of me. So, John, it is wonderful to see you virtually, as it be, but he's wearing his Madiera. Yeah. Madiera Island Ultra Trail hoodie. That looks pretty cozy.
It's really nice. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm jealous of multiple things, multiple reasons for being jealous. But so John, we were just discussing, you were on an earlier episode with the Barkley Fall Classic. And I'll put that one in the show notes so folks can dip back in if they want to learn more about that, because that was a fun show. But why don't you just give a rehash about who is John Goldfield and where did John come from and how did he get to this point?
Right. So I came to trail running pretty late in life. I will be 57 this month, and really it's been about 10 years at the most since I started even doing any kind of running. I ran a little bit in high school. I actually ran a few 10Ks in high school, and sort of was a back of the pack cross country guy for a couple of years, but never really took to it. Always sort of felt like, running was too painful and all that stuff, but somehow got into it about 10 years ago, making fun of a friend of mine who was a trail runner and making fun of his Vibram 5-finger toe shoes. He convinced me to put Strava on my phone, and I started just kind of jogging a couple miles at a time, and sort of slippery slope, started running a little bit longer, did a half marathon and did a marathon and hated it, and did that marathon again and hated it still, and somehow found the trails. And that was it. I mean, that was kind of the catalyst for all of this, is that I started running in the woods and started meeting some people, and took a chance on a 50K. I did the Mountain to Sea 50K back in 2017, I think. And that was really hard and amazing. And these people that I met were, a trip and all of that stuff. And yeah, just found my way into the ultra running community. Also partially by volunteering at the Umstead 100. I volunteered 1 year there, and I was completely hooked, and decided that I wanted to strive to run that race one day. And I was able to do that, my first 100 in 2019. So I've done 500-mile races now since then, and a smattering of 50Ks, a couple of 50-milers, variety of other stuff in there too. But this was my first international race.
Super cool. Yeah. And John is from the Research Triangle area. As you mentioned, he does a lot of volunteering when Umstead occurs. He's one of the medical coordinators for Aid Station 2. Is that right?
Well, actually, this year I got upgraded, promoted to the main headquarters aid station. So I run that the whole time, and oversee some of the medical as well, along with the main medical director, Dr. Ferrari. So yeah, I've become sort of an integral part of the Umstead. They folded me into the family.
That's awesome. That's great. Very cool. And John is also a father. Why don't you tell us about that part of your life?
2 amazing practically grown young women. Audrey is in Scotland at St. Andrews University. She'll be starting her junior year there, and Coralie will be starting her freshman year at Drexel University in Philadelphia this year. So they're amazing. They're super supportive of me. Yeah, my favorite people in the whole world.
Right on. That's wonderful. John is just a well-rounded individual. He has a great website. He does a lot of good write-ups on races, and we'll mention that towards the end so folks can check that out, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. But that said, prior to Madiera, am I saying it right? Madiera?
Yeah, Madiera.
Okay. So prior to Madiera, what would you say your hardest race to date was?
It seems like every race I've picked, it's harder than the last. So probably the Tahoe Rim Trail that I did last summer would qualify as that. It was it had a lot of elevation gain overall. It was at a little bit of elevation. The highest point was 8,000 something feet. And it was just a different environment too. It was somewhat warm, dry, and windy. So I had to deal with some not only dehydration, but mild hyponatremia issues that I had to troubleshoot during the race. And it was a long one. I finished in the golden hour, and it took me 32 something hours, and I was out there on my feet a long time. Actually, I think it was more than 32 hours. I don't know. It was in the end. I wasn't last, but I was in that golden hour for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So, that said, you did it, you did Tahoe, the rim, 100, and you're like, God, that was rough. So along comes Madiera.
Right. So I have this friend. I have to credit my Norwegian friend Magnar. I met Magnar through the Tanawa Adventures Trail Camps back in 2017. Or was it 2017? I think it was 2018 was when we did that camp. And we became friends through a series of 3 of those camps that I did. I did one in Western North Carolina, then I did one in New Mexico, then I did another one in Western North Carolina. And he and I became good friends, and I would follow his exploits because he lives in Norway and can travel all over Europe. He does all these amazing European races. And one of the places he kept going year after year was Madiera Island, which is a Portuguese island off the coast of Spain. Sort of directly out from the Rock of Gibraltar. And the pictures were just astounding. They're amazing. And so I kept saying, of all the crazy races that he does with tons of elevation and all this stuff, that's the one that if I was ever going to do a race, I would try to do. So fast forward to this past fall in September, he came out here to run Barkley with me because that was going to be my first year of the Barkley Fall Classic. And so he flew out here and was hanging out, and he gets on the website for Madiera Island Ultra Trail and says, "Oh, look, there are only 25 spots left in the 115K. And I just had one of those moments where I said, well, let's see. I probably can't do it because it's in April and Umstead's in April, and I've committed to that. And I look up the dates, and it was 2 weeks after. I was like, okay, well, that's not a problem. I said, it probably costs too much to fly there. It's all the way out in Portugal on some little mini island. And so I look up some flights on Orbitz or something, and they weren't all that expensive. They were about the same as flying to Europe. And then I thought, well, it's just going to be overall too expensive. And he said, well, I get an Airbnb and we could split it. It's actually pretty cheap. They're not very expensive on that island. So basically I had no excuses, and I just was in the right frame of mind and just feeling a little bit crazy. And so I said, sure, I'll sign up. And then he panicked and said, well, wait, I got to sign up too. We're running out of spots. So we both managed to get in kind of under the wire. And there's like 1,000 people in this race too. It's a huge race.
Right.
Plus there are 4 different, I think, distances in this thing. So this is the the sort of marquee distance, the 115K. And then there's like an 85K and a 60K and a 20K or something like that too. So, so we were signed up. Then it was just a matter of way back in September saying, well, I've got this thing. It's out there. I guess I better do some research and find out like what the deal is. And that's when the reality started to hit me. When I would look at the course profile and the overall elevation and start to read some reviews, you'd have to read everything translated from Portuguese or French or Spanish or something like that, because
Right.
hardly any Americans run it except for last year. Last year, Jim Walmsley won it for the men and Courtney Delwalder won it for the women. So it was like suddenly this cool thing to check out. So yeah, so I was signed up, and that's how that happened.
That's great. That's great. So tell us about the course. You started talking about how it's got this crazy elevation profile. Tell us all about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the elevation profile just basically looks like a series of, 4 giant climbs, really 3 big climbs with the middle section that looks like some smaller up and down climbs, which is really funny because now in retrospect, that middle section was the most brutal, even though it doesn't look as scary on the elevation profile. The elevation profile has these huge, massive spikes that you just say, oh my God, those are going to kill me. And they did, but it was that middle part that was really difficult and during the daytime and had a lot of technicality on the downhills and everything like that. So yeah, it's 115K, which is roughly 72 miles or so. It was estimated to have 7,100 meters of elevation gain, which is somewhere around 23,000, 24,000, depending on, how that works out, of gain. So more elevation gain than Tahoe Rim Trail in a shorter distance. Because Tahoe Rim Trail was actually 103 miles. And this is only going to be 72 miles or something. So
50K less.
Yeah, it just looks like there's on the profile of it, it looks like there is 0 flat sections. Like everything is either up or down. You're constantly climbing. But all you got to do is type in Madiera Island on Google and you see these amazing photographs of this. Madeira is basically like a volcanic island, really more like Hawaii than anything I can sort of imagine. But it's like if you take Hawaii and you mix it with this colonial Portuguese, little terraced farms and just these quaint little villages, seaside towns, fishing and all that stuff too. But flowers and bananas and fruit and, all that stuff all over the island. And because it's an island and it is so steep, it gets this cloud inversion layer halfway up every mountain. So every time you drive or climb or run or hike or whatever, you go through these clouds and you end up above them, even though the maximum elevation is only at 6,000 something feet. That's from sea level. So you're climbing, from 0 to 6,000 over and over a couple times. So yeah. And then the other part of the course that's really cool is that it's a lot of the trails are sort of death defying, in that they are built right into the side of these cliffs. They're like hand carved, hundreds of years old, and other trails that have stones to make the trail and stone steps or wooden steps or just boulders as steps and railings basically to keep you from plummeting to your death. But some of them are pretty narrow.
How do you do with heights?
Actually, thankfully, I'm fine with heights. I mean, I will admit when I get close to an edge and look over, especially if it's, thousands of feet down, it's a little unnerving, but at least I don't get vertigo or anything like that. So, because that's one of the things about this island, literally on the maps, even there are little icons that they put on the maps that have like a vertigo sign and it's like a warning for people if they have vertigo to not go past this point on the trail because you'll have a problem, clearly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible. How big is the island itself?
I can't remember exactly how big it is. It is, I had written it down somewhere. I want to say like, I don't know, like 700 square miles or something like that. It's not huge.
Well, that's pretty big.
It's not a huge island. And this course basically goes end to end for the most part. But it's a somewhat circuitous route too. So.
And what's the population like there is?
That's a good question. I don't know that for sure. The one big town is Funchal, and it's a pretty big town. But still, yeah, the population is pretty small. I need to look
Okay.
up those stats. That would be helpful.
Was that like the start or
No, so the start was in a little town called Porto Moniz, which is on the sort of northern coast. That is most known for its, it has these volcanic pools, sort of like this volcanic rock that formed these pools that are fed by seawater that people go and swim in and stuff like that. It's kind of amazing. And then just some restaurants and, some people fish from there and stuff like that. But it's a little tiny town. And then you leave from there and you go up over the mountains and end in Machiko, which was where I stayed, which is also a fairly small town, but it's a little bit closer to the airport and to Funchal, which is the big town. But Machiko's, again, just, has a little boardwalk area. It has a nice beach, and then just lots of little shops and stuff like that and farms.
how did you get over to the start?
So you had a choice. You could ride a bus. They provided buses for all the runners, but since we had Magnar and I had rented a car, and his fiance and my sister were there, and my sister drove us there basically to the start, because then she and Magnar's fiance crewed us throughout the rest of the race just by driving the car to the different spots. So
How crew accessible was the course?
it was not too bad. It had probably, let's see, how many aid stations do we have? 2, 4, 6, 8, like 9 aid stations, and probably at least 6 of those were crew accessible. Most of them were reasonable that she could drive up to. Some of them she had hiked just a little ways to get to. The first section, it required a lot of coming back down the mountain and around and back up. But after about the first half, most of those aid stations were pretty accessible, with really only a short drive between them, just because the route kind of wound around and had a lot more access that way.
If you forgot, let's say you forgot something, did they have any type of shops that, or were you like
there was one running store
okay,
in
cool.
Funchal, and it was tiny. We did go there because that's what you do, right? You go check out running stores. But I didn't need anything, thankfully. But Magnar was looking for like gaiters or something like that, and they didn't have it. But they had, they were selling Hokas and some other European brands, Innovate, stuff like that. At the expo, they had a little bit of stuff for sale. The Madiera Island, or Mute as they call it, the Mute program was selling some shorts and liners and shirts and arm warmers. I got a couple arm sleeves that I bought, bib holders. There was another group there called the Madiera Island Oceans and Trails group, and they were selling some clothing. And then there was a clothing manufacturer that was a sponsor that was there selling a bunch of clothes as well. So it was a small little expo, probably had a few tents, or one big tent, but sort of included a few spots in it. But it, probably bigger than most of the little ultras I've run around here. So
Tell me about the excitement of doing a international race.
it's crazy. It's just so wild because, well, first of all, there are only 10 Americans in this race, and 2 of them were elites. Green Malcolm and Abby Hall were in it as well. And then there was one guy, I can't remember his name, but I think he was listed as an elite too. And then the rest of us, were just, I met one of the other Americans, was just a regular guy from California. So a huge number of obviously Portuguese, French, German, Polish, not too many from the UK, but there were some from the UK. Just folks from all over the place. But yeah, all of that sort of Southern Europe and almost Central Europe places. So lots of different languages. And it was so funny being in Machiko. I was there a week ahead of time. And so the last few days before the race, suddenly you started seeing people that you could tell were runners. They show up and they've got the different looking shoes, or they're wearing their hydration pack because you had to go and check in and show your pack with the required gear and get a tag on it and everything. And people with UTMB hats on and things like that. You just started to get a clue that this was the crowd starting to show up. And but yeah, all the different languages and stuff. It was really fun.
Yeah. But was there much of a language barrier so far as around the island or
Well,
in
it's
amongst the
funny because
race?
English is kind of like the default language for a lot of these countries, and because so many people come from elsewhere to Madeira, a lot of the shop owners and restaurants and everything would just default to English. And a lot of people would ask me if I was from the UK because they just didn't, an English accent to them didn't necessarily sound any different. It was, just speaking English. But even in the race, there were a couple of times where I would be in a group of people and it would become clear that everybody was from a different country, but they were all sort of just default sharing, English as the common language. Cool. Not lucky for me.
And you just mentioned the required gear. What did that look like?
It was pretty basic. You had to have an emergency blanket. You had to have a minimum amount of water carrying capacity and food carrying capacity. You had to have a whistle. You had to have an ace bandage. Let's see what else was in there. You had to have a certain type of coat, that was going to be at least water resistant to a certain level. I think those were the basic things that you had to have in the bag. But I basically checked in with my pack, fully loaded with all that stuff in it. And they just asked me, is everything in there? And I said, yep. And they said, okay, here's your tag.
Yeah.
They didn't even look at it. But I guess they had the right to, or the ability to check anybody's bag at any point to make sure you had all your stuff in there. So
right on. Cool. What was the weather like?
Amazing. It was basically, it was in the 60s to low 70s every day. The only day it rained was Friday morning before the race started. And that was short-lived. And night times were in the maybe mid to low 60s. Yeah, it was fantastic. We got amazing weather because the year before they had gotten rained on in the beginning. And that was, that's not a big deal when it was warmer. But as you got up to the upper elevations, it got pretty cold. So even when we were running this and we would get up to the upper elevations, we would be wet at that point because not only you're sweaty, but then you're going up through some clouds and mist and stuff like that. So by the time I got up to the first aid station, which was about 9 miles in, I was pretty chilled in the aid station and having to dig out like all the layers I had, and my hands were cold because my gloves were wet. And it was fine once I got moving, but being still was pretty cold. And it was only, maybe upper 50s at that point, but just enough to really get you chilled.
Is that typical for this time of year?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty temperate climate like most of the year, especially, starting in spring like that. I don't think it gets overly hot during the summer even. So
cool.
But they can get some pretty good storms out there.
You mentioned, getting to the first aid station, which I guess we could also mention that this was a odd start time.
Right. Yeah, so it's a midnight start time on Friday night because it runs then, basically all night Friday night, or Friday night into Saturday. I did my best to try to take a nap on Friday, but honestly, I didn't. I mean, I laid down several times and may have briefly snoozed for 15 minutes or something like that. But yeah, basically it was 2 nights of no sleep.
We worked on trying to get this into Ultra Pacer, and we're having some problems getting it to kind of calculate with the cutoff times. What was the overall cutoff for this race?
So the overall cutoff was 32 hours. So it had to be by, I think that's 8 a.m. Sunday morning. And you can make this race a Western States qualifier if you finish it in less than 29 hours. So that was my goal, was to try to finish in 29 hours or less. And so I had used the Ultra Pacer program and put in a 28-hour pace because I figured that would just give me a little cushion and all that stuff. And it's very interesting because I have to look, maybe I have to dig a little deeper and see like where maybe that it started to deviate. But I was kind of right on that 28-hour pace for the first third or so. And then it was that middle of the course, that part of the course that looks like it's the shorter mountains, but because they're more technical and difficult, and because they were during the day and it was a little warmer, some of the climbs were probably a little slower because of that. I lost some time, and more importantly, by the time I got to that halfway point, I was completely like mentally destroyed, and coming into an aid station later than I thought and getting close to the cutoff, I started to just kind of get down on myself about it. But in reality, I wasn't that far behind my estimated arrival time, which is sort of interesting looking back on it. I had estimated I was going to get to that halfway point at about 10 minutes after 3, and I rolled in there at 3:30, which isn't that much later,
Right.
but the cutoff was 4. And I had to, I wanted to change my shoes, my shirt. I needed to get rid of all my stuff and swap out a bunch of things. And I was just, I kind of was thinking I wasn't going to make it. And yet I rolled out of there at 10 minutes to 4, which, it's only 10 minutes ahead of cutoff, but on paper, at least, it looked like I probably could have, taken a shot at that 29-hour finish still. But the problem was that the next thing was a straight up climb. I don't know. Let's see. Going up to Pico Rubia is 4,780 foot climb over the course of, a little bit less than 6 miles.
Oof.
So
that's brutal.
It was just slow. There was no way that was going to happen fast.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a good tool, Ultra Pacer, obviously, and kind of gives you kind of a guesstimate, because it kind of takes that calculation based off of, elevation gain, descent. You can even put in like heat factor, through the course of the day and such. And you can even change your curve, like starting out a little bit faster and slowing down. It's
right.
Pretty neat tool.
I'd be able to tweak it. I think based on my experience from this, I'd be able to tweak it a little more accurately. Also being able to put in some of the terrain changes, some of the technicality, because to me, it wasn't clear to me how much stairs can be considered a technical trail.
Sure.
Because normally it just seems like stairs are stairs, but right. When the stairs are off camber and at weird angles and made out of, boulders sometimes, and wet and muddy, and sometimes they're wood, and sometimes they're like, 1.5 feet tall each step. And it's like, oh my God, it was just killing me on the way down.
Yeah, that's tough, because that does slow you down on the way down,
Yeah. I got passed by people on the way down, and I would end up catching them all on the way up.
Gotcha. Let's go back to the start. So I gotta imagine pretty exciting, even at midnight. It's got to be pretty exciting having, is it 1,000 in the 115K or 1,000 just overall with all the races combined?
No, it's almost 1,000 in the 115K.
Wow,
it was a big race.
Yeah. So that's
so it's a huge crowd.
Yeah.
Loud, loud music. The announcers are on a big PA system, and they're yelling out stuff, in 3 different languages. And everybody's amped up, and there's TV cameras there and bright lights everywhere, and everybody around you is from a different country and all these different languages. I mean, it was a trip. It was tons of energy, really fun.
Nice. Did you feel pretty energized? I mean, like, I've stepped up to the line at midnight at like Hellgate, and I'm like, I'm tired. I don't care how excited everybody is. I'm tired.
I wasn't feeling that at all. Yeah, I was feeling like totally fired up and ready. I mean, I do pretty well with sleep deprivation anyways. I just have, background that I worked in the emergency room for a long time prior to this. And so did shift work and was able to do that. And I had just recently, 2 weeks prior to that, spent all night awake at Umstead, in the aid station, and then went out for a 4-hour run after that. So I had done really good sleep deprivation training prior to this. So that actually never really became an issue for me. I didn't get the sleepies at any point when I was running, thankfully. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that midnight start was fun. It was super exciting. This a huge crowd there seeing us off, and then cool thing about this race is that you do a little climb. You do like a 350-meter climb in the first mile. You crest this little hill and you drop down into the neighboring town, which is a very small town, but you go across this bridge that sort of loops through the town, and there's a whole ton of more people there. Fans, family, just lining the streets,
And this
making
is
tons
like,
of noise,
yeah.
cowbells and those vuvuzela horns, and you can hear it from, a mile and a half away as you're coming in. And you run through this section and everybody's high-fiving, everybody's screaming. That's probably one of the highest heart rates I logged in the entire race, because I was so amped up as I went through there, laughing and high-fiving. And you're only like, you're barely into the race at all. You're like
Right.
a mile and a half into the race.
And it's like, what, like, it's just after midnight,
Yeah,
like,
it's just after midnight. You're all stoked, 1 a.m. And like straight after that, you finish this cool little thing and you just turn around and you just start climbing. And you're
yeah.
okay, so much for that. Now you just got to settle into this, I don't know, 3-hour climb to get up to the top of this thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, I remember UTMB just like looking up and just seeing the headlights, like, oh
Yeah.
my God, like
And
that's
they're
where
like
we're going.
above you. It's
Yeah.
not that they're ahead of you, above you. They're literally above you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like
It's
you're
crazy.
like, how am I going up there?
Yeah,
And like
for sure.
switchback after switchback after switchback. That's how
Yeah.
you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we mentioned earlier, John is from the Research Triangle area, which isn't known for its tremendous elevation gain and descent. So, we had to be a little bit more creative. And, John, you can be, as honest as you want. Like there were some things on the plan that, we didn't get to for various
Yeah.
reasons. But, you want to talk a little bit about like, some of the things you did to try to prep for this?
Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of the mountain legs routine that was added on to so many different days in my runs. And I would, I used to hate that, but every time I started doing that in preparation for this race, I kept thinking to myself, this is going to be all those stairs I'm going up.
Right.
And I really think that simple little routine of hopping up and down the stair and doing the lunges, I think that did very well for me, overall in terms of my ability to climb. My ability to descend, that was a whole different thing. And I don't know, in retrospect, I talked to a few people about it after the race, and one guy said that, he was agreeing that there was a problem, and he said he was going to start doing slackline training, and had another guy talk to me about running downhill sideways, like running, foot crossing, sideways downhill, and then the other way sideways downhill, to try to like develop your quads for this eccentric motion that is like really hard to train for, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We had talked about me trying to run a double Mount Mitchell ascent, which would have been fantastic training for this, honestly. But the day that I was supposed to go up there, I wasn't feeling well, the day before. And so it just didn't make any sense to go up there. It was so cold and, stress my body out. And so I ended up bailing on that and just going down to some parking garage that had 6 floors. And I ran up and down stairs there for an hour and a half. And that was helpful. I think that was helpful more mentally than anything, just to feel like I did something. But those stairs were so easy. Oh my God. Those were just the sweetest little, pitiful little normal built to code stairs. Every step the same. It was like, oh, those are stairs. Go to Madiera and you'll see some stairs.
And that's the hard thing, right? Like, I mean, that's a hard thing to replicate, is being as precise and exact as like what you would see at something like Madiera. Right. Because all of our structures, really, it's like you said, they're uniform, right? Like, whereas like in Madiera, it's like, these were chiseled out of stone, so there's no like uniformity. Like it's So
To me,
yeah,
it felt more like climbing. If you were to take the steepest sections of Profile Trail going up
sure.
Grandfather Mountain,
Yep.
or that trail going up that one backside section at Pilot Mountain, or
Hmm.
even the very, very top of Hanging Rock, or something like that.
Right.
But those are very short sections.
Right. Right.
We had me go up to South Mountains and climb the waterfall steps.
Yep.
And those are, that was good stuff, except they were so short.
Right. Right. It's
They
just the
feel
hardest thing.
they feel long. They
Yeah.
have felt long for me for years. Anytime I've done, South Mountains marathons or something,
Yeah.
and I'm struggling up those stairs and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is so hard. And that is nothing.
It's amazing how it warps our perception.
When you have a 3-hour climb of
Oh,
that, and you're not just like stopping and taking a nap during that time, you're just constantly moving forward.
yeah. Yeah.
Maybe stop to breathe for 5 seconds, 10 seconds at a time, but like you're just
Yeah.
there for the next
Yeah.
3 hours climbing.
I think the only thing that you really could do is just have a stairmaster or access to a
Yeah.
stairmaster and just do that. We use the treadmill, to do
Yep.
incline because we didn't have a stairmaster, but
Right.
I mean that would be the only other option is really, just instead of treadmill, plug in stairmaster,
Right.
just do
Right.
stairmaster. Which again, you've got this uniform step, just boop 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 boop. But I mean,
Right.
that'd probably be,
But it's
the
something.
thing. But yeah,
And it's like the
right.
mountain legs routine. At least that was something
Yeah.
that got me some good quad strength for stepping up for sure. And that coupled with the help of my poles and just some mental fortitude definitely got me up the climbs. I think reasonably well, honestly. Like
Yeah.
I said, I was often passing people or leading groups of guys. Had some guys that I stayed with for the most of the second half of the race that would say to me that they liked my pace uphill because it was just steady and constant forward. And I got that I've gotten that at other races too, where people have not wanted to pass me, because if somebody's on your tail, you're always like, hey, you want to go around, but people don't want to pass me because they like whatever pace I'm setting. But once I'd start going downhill, my quads were just so trembly that I would become just a little more timid on some of the really technical stair stuff, and I would just defer and let people go past me that could vomit a little bit more.
Yeah. Did you lose much time in the aid stations themselves?
A little bit more than I wanted to, or at least that I estimated on the Ultra Pacer chart. I was hoping to get in and out of most aid stations in around 5 minutes, and it usually took me a little longer than that. But some of that's because these aid stations were a little bit crowded always. So sometimes it was a little tough to move around and get to the stuff you needed to get, and you kind of had to do everything yourself. It's a really funny thing too, because Europeans, they like to sit down in the aid station and have a meal. Like every aid station, people were sitting down with a plate of stuff. I was like, what are you doing? And yet, the same guys that would be sitting down there eating, they had gotten there ahead of me, and I would leave before them, but then they'd catch up to me. So, it all works out, but that's their style versus
Yeah.
my style was always just get in and out. I was always in a hurry to get out of there. Never wanted to sit down, all that stuff. So, but yeah, the aid stations took just a little longer than I expected. One of the aid stations, the middle of the course aid station, I had estimated 15 minutes, and it ended up taking me 20 minutes, but that's still pretty good. And then the station before that, I only was supposed to take 5 minutes, and that one also took me 20 minutes because I had to go to the bathroom and I had to do, find some stuff for myself, and so it ended up taking a little longer in the aid stations, and that definitely made an impact.
What was about the middle aid station? What did you plan so long? Were you swapping shoes?
That was my plan. There was to swap shoes, shirt, to take, like, I basically had everything in my pack for the first half already, because that was the only place where you could have a drop bag. So I had all the food that I needed was broken up into either what was in my pockets of the pack, plus a baggie, for halfway through the first half. And then the plan at the halfway point was to unload all that crap, restock everything, get some real food, troubleshoot any, hot spots on the foot, anything like that. So I had given myself 15 minutes for that. And it ended up taking me 20, but, and part of that was just because I was kind of, feeling wah and needed a little bit of butt kicking by my sister.
Nice. Wow, we can talk about that in a second. The aid station fair, you mentioned that there wasn't much assistance. Obviously it was a very crowded atmosphere, so
yeah, I mean, there were volunteers there that were great, but it was just, you had to kind of figure your way around people, and everybody had their poles out and stuff like that. So
yeah.
some of the places were a little bit of a small room where the water and stuff would be, so you just had to get to your water stuff. The food was probably pretty typical European stuff. They had like blocks of cheese, and they had bread, and they had, some sort of like, it was a cake thing that was sort of, I don't know, like nutmeg and cinnamon flavored or something like that. Yeah. So they had some meat thing there too. And then they had fruit. It was the first time in an ultra that I've really suddenly went to town on orange slices. At the top of Pico Rivio, the huge, the highest peak up there, I hit this one aid station, and I reached for an orange for some reason, and then me and one guy just kept going, like we were just it was a feeding frenzy. Me and this German guy just eating oranges frantically. So that was a thing. They had soup, which was fine. They had pasta, usually like some noodles that you could put, red sauce on, or they'd have some sort of weird meat sauce. And I kind of avoided the sauces. I just didn't know how they were going to settle in my stomach, but the pasta went down okay.
Right on. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you talked about how, you got to halfway and you're switching out your shoes, but you're also having a pity party.
Yeah.
Let's kind of dive into that. So tell me about this.
So this halfway point, if you look at the profile of this race, there are these huge mountains, right? It's kind of like your eyes get distracted by these huge mountains. And the halfway point is a little town called Corral das Freiras, which is where nuns used to go run and hide in the mountains from the conquering, bad guys.
Okay.
So it's this little kind of semi-mountain town. It's at I don't know what the elevation is. Let's see. It's at 2,000 feet somewhere, maybe. I don't know. It's it's after you've done some big climbs, and it's right after you've done this crushing descent, like straight down, brutal. Like on the map, you can see, oh yeah, it is pretty straight up and down. Okay. And then you get down and on the way down, you see the town. So you're getting close. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to make it to the aid station. That's Corral right down there. And you get down to the town, you have to go through some streets in a little bit. And you're like, okay, it's going to be soon. It's going to be soon. You're looking at your watch. You're like, I'm getting close to my estimated time. And then all of a sudden you're on this road and you see this wall, literally this giant, like 500-foot tall retaining wall on the side of a road with stairs that are built in, zigzagging up the stairs. And the nice volunteer at the bottom with their yellow, vest on saying, hurry. And you hurry up to her and you get to these more stairs and you're like, dude, really? And she says, only 1.5 kilometers left. What? Wait, I'm supposed to be here already, and now you want me to go up that? So then you slog up these stairs, right? And everybody's coming back the other way because this is like an out and back section. My gosh. And they're saying, hurry, make the cutoff. And you're like, dude, I don't even know how far we're going to go. Then you get to the top of the stairs and you still have to like wind through this little tiny town, these little streets, and it's quiet. And it's like, I don't know, it's in the afternoon. So everybody in town's asleep probably. And finally you get to this like school and they loop you around and you come down into their little like gymnasium area and you're just like demoralized at that point because you've gone way further than you expected to this aid station. And that's the funny thing is that I was 30 minutes ahead of cutoff, but I felt like I was about to be pulled. Like in my mind, I was like, oh my God, I'm not even going to make this cutoff. And I was 30 minutes ahead of it, which is nobody loves to be that close to a cutoff, but I've been there plenty of times before. And on my estimated time of arrival, I was only 20 minutes behind my estimated time. So really,
Right.
I was okay shape, but mentally I was not. And as I rolled in, my sister was there. And thank goodness too, because she had texted me before that saying that the rental car had broken down, which
Oh
is another whole funny story on her side.
God.
Because apparently gasolia is not gasoline. That is
Oh geez.
so yeah, that happened. Poor
Oh my
thing.
gosh.
so so they somehow managed to get a replacement rental car in time to still meet me at this halfway point, because I was coming into this aid station thinking I was going to not only be really close to the cutoff and my brain was fried and I didn't want to run anymore, but that I would have to do all of this stuff that I wanted to do myself. So I roll in, she says, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Not good. I don't think I'm going to make it. I'm not even sure if I'm going to get out of here in time. I have no idea if I'll make the next aid station because I got to climb all the way up to Pico Rubio." She said, "Let's just see what we can do. Let's get you in here and get you changed." She did it was the perfect crew response. Not like saying, "Oh, you're fine, it's going to be great." She just said, "Let's just change your shoes, change your shirt, get you food and see where you're at." And I'm like, "Okay." So I sat down, and of course, at that point, all it takes is just a little bit of like getting that process going. And I know in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I'm never going to pull myself from a race, unless I've got some dire circumstance. Because I did that at Barkley, and I kind of always regretted that I pulled myself, and I thought I should have been forced to leave the course by race officials. So I said this time I was not gonna leave this course until somebody cut the corner off my bib. So I mean, by the time I was sitting there eating and I had done all the stuff I needed to do and I was changed, I had fresh shoes and socks, and I thought, well, what the hell am I doing? I got 10 minutes till cutoff. I'll get up and start walking and grab some food in my hand and walk past this guy from Poland that I had been walking with for a while, and whacked him on the back and said, "We're getting out of here." And he waved to me, and I headed down the road and back out through that village and back down those damn stairs. And there were people coming in still, and I kept saying to them, "Okay, good luck, good luck." And this poor woman was crying as she was coming up the stairs, and she didn't speak English, but I didn't know what to say. And it's the one time I used my Portuguese "desculpe," which means "I'm sorry," and I gave her a little hug and said "desculpe," and she said, she kept going. So I know she wasn't going to make it. A lot of people didn't make cutoff at that place.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And that's 63 kilometers. So that's 39 miles or something in, but after some pretty punishing climbs and descents.
Right.
So,
right. So like, as you said earlier, you're coming out of there, and then you had the big climb.
Yeah.
Up, what is that, Pico Rosa or something like that?
Pico Rubio, which is 1,800 meters above sea level, which is about 6,000 something feet. So the elevation of Mount Mitchell, but we're coming from what was that? I think it ended up being a 4780 gain feet.
Man.
So
did they have a cutoff?
Part of the cool thing about it was that I knew I was about to go into the part of the course that I was the most excited to see. This is the most beautiful. It was daytime. I knew it was going to be hard climbing, but this is the part that I was looking forward to the whole time. And I was disappointed that I was going to, maybe miss a cutoff halfway through and have only seen really nighttime stuff and some, reasonably beautiful things still, but nothing like what I was about to see. And I was rewarded big time with that climb. I mean, I got up to the top of Pico Rubio at sunset above the clouds, which was just stunning. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even climbing through the clouds up to there, I kept saying to people around me that I felt like I was in, the land of the lost or some prehistoric place, and some pterodactyl was going to come and snatch my hat off my head any second. It's just amazing. I mean, just so, so beautiful. And then there's a second peak. It's called Pico Arriero, and it was after Pico Revio, and there's a bunch of ups and downs in there, and some of them are really sketchy. I really wanted to film some of the little mini descents that were there and some of the stairs you had to go down, but I was so petrified that I would either slip and die, or that I would drop a pole or drop the camera and I would just never see it again at that point. So it's like, yeah, I'll just remember these pictures in my head.
Um, so how was were you kind of feeling a little bit better mentally? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I was still as I was hiking up, I was still thinking, okay, there's still a possibility, because this felt so slow. There's still a possibility I'm not going to make the cutoff at Pico Rubio, or the next cutoff, which was Chao de Lagoa, which was cutoff was supposed to be at 11 p.m. So Pico was at 8 p.m. and Chao de Lagoa was on the backside, kind of going back down the mountain at 11 p.m. And I thought, well, if I don't make those cutoffs, at least I tried. At least I was working hard and made it up here. I got to see all this amazing stuff. I'm just going into nighttime at this point anyway, so it's just going to be a long night. So if I don't make cutoffs, I'm going to be okay with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere coming down off of Pico Arririo, I decided I wanted to finish. I wanted to make it. So I just kept moving and kept trying to move as best I could going downhill. And some of those downhills were still really steep. These steep inclines sometimes that weren't stairs were even worse, because then your toes are just jamming into the front of your shoes no matter what you do with your laces and all that stuff, and you just kind of do the stutter step for so long to try to keep going. And it was around this point also that this Polish guy ended up he and I had been running kind of on and off together, and he and I just started talking because he was trying to stay awake. And we talked about everything. I mean, that whole thing of like in an ultra, when you have a buddy and you end up sharing everything. I mean, we were talking about like all of our personal stuff, our careers, our families, our dreams and wishes. And then we got into like politics and US healthcare and the pharmaceutical system and like crazy. I mean, like just kind of kept going and going. So it was really fun. He and I made pretty good friends. And yeah, I made it into Chao de Lagoa, which is at 52 miles or 83.8K. And I was completely like refreshed, legs tired, but like, let's go, let's do it. And my sister, God love her, she met me there with a lukewarm microwaved cheeseburger that she had brought from the apartment that we were in that I had left over there. And she's like, I have a cheeseburger that's still warm. Do you want it? And I was like, oh my God, yes, I do. So, in fact, Bartosz, my Polish friend, I said I was going to go grab a cheeseburger my sister had. He said, they have cheeseburgers here? And I said, not for you, pal.
Not for you. It's just the Americans.
Just the Americans bring their own cheeseburgers. So yeah, I got through that aid station in much better frame of mind and kind of cruised. It's a ton of descent from there, like basically all the way down to sea level before I saw my sister again. And I actually beat my estimated time there, even though I was well behind my previous times. When I got to Puerto de Cruz, which is the last aid station before the finish, she was still sleeping in her car. She wasn't expecting me for like another 15 or 20 minutes. So,
oh, wow.
So that was kind of good. And at that point, I was just like, all right, let's just head out and kind of finish this thing. So the last 16K, there's a little climb to get out of that seaside town. And then it's mostly along the coast. And it's basically flat. It's a very gradual uphill for a while, and then a little short semi-technical downhill, and then it was completely flat all the way into town for the last like 5K. But that coastal trail, I ended up being by myself for the most part the whole time, because the guys that I've been running with stayed in the last aid station eating. They had their plates of food, and I was like, I gotta go, I gotta get going. I don't know if I'm walking or running at this point, so I gotta just keep going. But I ended up by myself a lot, and it was just really quiet out there. And there were these weird birds that make these bizarre noises. What the hell are they called? They got a funny name, something or other K. Anyway, I'll have to play them for you. Play a clip for it. Well, I actually recorded it on the video that I did. You can hear them flying over my
Okay.
head. They kind of go like, "Ba-dong, ba-dong," you know, make this weird sound in the middle of the dark. And the other thing is that my headlight. So the first night I had used a headlight, one of those night core
Yes.
headlights,
Yeah.
is amazing and super light. I had given it to my sister to recharge during the day.
Right.
It would have been fine, except that the car broke down
Oh.
and it was plugged into the car.
Oh.
By the time it got back to me, it had gotten semi-charged. So it lasted all the way until that last aid station. And as I left that last aid station, it would be on and it would suddenly go dim and it would go on the lowest mode for a little while and then it would
Right.
shut off. So I had my waist light, my Lumen 600, which was adequate, but that's all I had that was reliable because I was stupid and didn't pack an extra headlight. So I would just have to turn on the headlight when I really needed it to look for something and then turn it off again. And so it's kind of just like was going this little tiny pool of light right in front of me from my Lumen 600, which I was worried that I didn't want to have it full power as well. So that would only be high sometimes. And anyways, I was just creeping along out there, you know, jogging where I could, and started having mild hallucinations, which was kind of fun. The rock walls have this lichen, sort of whitish stuff spattered all over the place.
Uh-huh.
That stuff is just prime hallucinations, especially when you have a weird, weak light source that's not on your head; it's down at your face, so you're getting this weird sort of reflection. And I was seeing faces. I saw Lisa Simpson with her eyeballs gouged out. That was kind of freaky. I saw a Joker's mask.
Oh my gosh.
At one point on the side of the trail, I very clearly saw a full face motocross helmet.
No.
And it turned out to just be ferns.
No.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was just laughing at all that stuff.
That's great. So approaching the finish, you obviously have your watch and you're looking at it. What's it telling you?
So, you know, my watch ended up having me closer to like 76 miles or something like that, 118, I think, K.
Okay.
But I knew this part of the trail somewhat because I had hiked it a couple days earlier with my sister backwards during the day. So I knew at what point it turned away from the coastal trail. And then I knew that it started on this levada. The levadas are these irrigation canals that are built all over the island, and they have a little tiny trail next to them. And levadas are, you know, for the most part, pretty flat because they're just moving the water around, but sometimes they have a slight downhill to them. So we're following this levada for a while, and it seems to just go forever. Of course, it's 3 miles, but you can see the town, and you're above the town, maybe 800 feet above town at least or more. Yeah. And you're cruising along this hillside, to the left side of the town, which is on your right, below you, and you can kind of hear the expo area and the finish line area and all that stuff. And then eventually you get to this sudden right turn that just plummets straight down the mountain. And the first section is probably 200 yards long of just super steep dirt. Like there's nothing but it's just dirt, and it's like straight down, and you're just like skitter with trying not to trip, and trying not to let your toes just bust out of the front of your shoes, until eventually you get to some stairs, and they're pretty reasonable stairs. They're not like too difficult. They're just more and more stairs, and then finally it kind of dumps you out down on the little beachside boardwalk, and then you run along that, and as you approach the finish line chute, it's a big long finish line chute, like a classic sort of looks like UTMB kind of thing. The chute itself is probably nearly 100 yards long, maybe 50 yards long at least.
Sure.
And all the flags and everything, and then announcing your name as you come in, and they have that little elevated platform as you go over the finish line, and I did a little leap in the air, and the photographer got it. But yeah, then it's like that's it. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's asleep still. There's like 5 of you down there.
Yep. And what did the clock read?
So I think it read. It was like. I think it was 6:57 in the morning or something like that, or 6:50 something in the morning. So that ended up being just shy of 30 hours.
Okay. So hair over the Western States qualifier, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
A little over. And I think it was 30. I think it was close to 31 hours is what it was. Yeah. So it was
Okay.
almost 2 hours over the Western States qualifier.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you'll probably have to look for another qualifier.
Yes. So I was already on the site looking at races, trying to decide if I really want to do it or not. I mean, that's kind of the thing, is to decide, well, I've got, I think I had 4 tickets. And this year would have given me 8 tickets.
Right.
Um, and if I got to squeeze something in, what do I want it to be? Do I want to just do a 100-mile race where I just have to finish, or do I want to try to do a 100K somewhere where there's a time limit again? And what can I afford? And
Sure.
when can I do it, and where can I do it? And really, is it that important? That's the other question I'm
Sure.
kind of struggling with at this point. Is I could take a year
Mm-hmm.
and just not worry about it.
Right.
Or is it, is Western States for me, still something that I'm going to keep planning my whole running calendar around? Or do I just run whatever the heck I feel like, signing up for, which is completely reasonable too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. To be discussed.
Yes, that's still in the process of deciding.
All right. So Madiera overall, recommendations, thumbs up, 2 thumbs up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. God, go to Madiera just to vacation there, if nothing else. But the race is amazing. It's really well supported. It's incredibly well marked. My God, they had so many trail markers. It was fantastic.
Nice.
The aid stations, like I say, they get crowded because there are 4 different races at the same time. So there's a couple of spots where you're getting mixed in with the other racers, but I was far enough back in the pack. I think the middle of the pack runners get that a little bit more.
Sure.
And like I said, sometimes it's a little crowded to try to get what you need and everything like that. But there are plenty of volunteers, and they're very helpful. And it's just there's a language barrier, so you just have to get past that. But the language barrier is kind of the coolest part too. I mean, being there amongst a whole bunch of Europeans, being one of only a tiny handful of Americans there. I got to meet Corrine, Malcolm, and Abby Hall after the race at the awards ceremony, and Corrine had to drop because she had a problem with her ankle, and Abby was doing great, but ended up just having a rough time in the second half of the race. But yeah, there's just like so few of us out there.
Yeah.
That's really just not a thing that Americans even know about. I mean, so many people that I talked to had maybe heard of Madiera, but didn't even know where it was really. And the flight that I was on was a direct flight from New York, and there was hardly anybody on the plane. So I think the Americans just really haven't discovered that place yet.
Gotcha.
But the French and the Spanish and Germans and obviously the Portuguese, they all know about it. And it's one of the most popular island destinations out there.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And how did your friends do?
Magnar did fantastic. He ran a 100-miler with me at No Business last year, or year before last, and at that race he stuck with me for the beginning because he's a lot faster than me. But he stuck with me for the first, I think in that race, for the first 13 miles before he took off, and he ended up top 10 in that race. So he decided that he was going to stick with me in the beginning of this race too, because he has a tendency to go out a little bit too fast and hard, and sometimes blows up about halfway through. So he stayed with me for not 13 miles, but maybe the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles at least through that big, exciting, town where you're high-fiving everybody. And then as we climb back out of that hill, I could see him ahead of me, and he would look back sometimes and he would wave, and I'd see him ahead of me, and then he was gone. He ended up finishing in like 23 hours and change. So he just crushed it. He had a great race, felt good the whole time. Awesome. He had a really good time.
And your friend from Poland, your new friend from
Poland came in just a few minutes after me. Finished. Yep. It was great. I got to be there at the finish line and high five him. And he immediately handed me his phone and said, "Friend me on Facebook." And I was like, all right.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, that was kind of fun to be able to see some of those guys come through that have been running with me intermittently. And I even got, as I was going through, so everybody who's, I don't have it with me, but everybody who's in the race has a bracelet they put on you at the beginning of the race that's color coded for whatever distance it is.
Right.
So everybody keeps their bracelets on all week while they're waiting for the race, and then even afterwards. So in the airport, I'm walking through the airport, and some guy grabs me and says, "Did you finish?" in some thick accent from whatever country he's in. Sure. And I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "I remember you from so and such, and I had to drop at the same station. Good job," and everything. It was really funny.
That's cool.
Yep. Saw another guy waiting for his plane, and he had also dropped, but he had the same color wristband as me, and he was the one I started talking to about training for descents, and he said he was going to buy a slack line, and that was going to be his quad training. And like his wife saying, we have to board now. We have to board. Like, no, wait, but what about?
That's awesome.
It's kind of fun. I mean, it's such great. A trip because I've done a bunch of these, obviously, and you make tons of friends, right? And in a US Ultra, it seems like from the get-go, people start chatting. It maybe takes 5 or 10 miles, but for the most part, people start chatting. In this race, I didn't start like having people really start communicating with me until well into halfway or more. And oftentimes it was me instigating that. Yeah. And people just kind of didn't talk all that much unless they were, from similar countries, I guess,
Gotcha.
But yeah, there was a Portuguese couple that kind of semi-adopted me because they would pass me on the downhills and I would pass them on the uphills. And my sister got to see them at one point and said hi to them because she had helped them with something. And they said, "Oh, who are you with?" And she said, "Oh, the American with the beard." And they said, "Oh, Santa Claus." Apparently I'm Santa Claus too.
That's great. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh my God, John, that's such a great, what a great experience. It's so cool. Yeah. And congrats on the finish, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, such a tough race. So amazing.
Yeah.
Any other final memories or thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, just what an amazing place that is. I mean, it's just like magic. I mean, so much of that course has just these amazing changes in the what are the biomes, I guess. You're in jungle, and then you're in these rocky cliff faces with these weird tropical plants just clinging to the sides of the walls, and then you're above the clouds, and it's volcanic rock, and just so amazing. We did a couple of little shakeout runs ahead of time, and and I know I kept apologizing in my training notes saying, "I know I was supposed to do 40 miles at a really low pace, or 40 minutes at a really low pace, but I ended up doing an hour and a half, 3,000 feet of gain. Sorry."
I'm just glad it didn't come back to bite you in the butt.
Right. Well, maybe, who knows? But I think those hills would have kicked my butt either way if I had completely been compliant with tapering versus not have some fun. So
that's fair.
There's just so much to see there, and it's so beautiful. I really want to go back.
Nice. Very cool. We mentioned earlier your website, which is it Finding Awesome?
Findingawesome.net. Yeah, I wasn't cool enough to get the .com, but Finding Awesome, all one word. And I've just got some. I just uploaded the video footage from this race, which is apologetically long, but I didn't feel like out anything because it was all good.
And connecting with you on socials, is that also on your website?
Yep, that's also on the website. I'm just John Goldfield on Facebook, and I'm actually Johnny Tulips on Instagram. Johnny with the number 2 lips, and that's a whole band reference thing from years ago because I play harmonica.
And you're also on Strava if anybody wants to.
I'm on Strava. Yep.
Cool. All right, man. Well, John, once again, congratulations. Thank you for sharing your story here. That was so fun and awesome to hear. So you're wonderful. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Well, congratulations to John. It's fantastic. Just, it was like we knew it was going to be challenging, and receiving the text messages from John's sister in the group chat, just hearing how it was going, low points, high points. He's gonna finish. It's just it was awesome. It was emotional roller coaster. Sitting there biting my teeth. He kind of, like you said, he started at midnight, but here it was I forget what time it was, but it's just we were off on timing. So I woke up and I didn't see any kind of updates. So I texted, and the next one that was coming through was he was going into that last aid station. So it was cool to follow along. So well done, John. Like I said, just really enjoyed hearing about that adventure. So thank you for sharing it. So far as everything goes here in the world of MR Runningpains, training is progressing, building back up. I got just under 90 miles last week. I think I got about 87 in last week, which has been the highest I've done thus far. And that was with just a long run of 21 miles. So things have been good. I've been using that kind of go for a run and then just hike the steep climbs over in the Homestead neighborhood, which has been giving me over 2,000 feet of gain in 9 or 10 miles. Just kind of, like I said, hiking those and then running the downhills, which is really what I'm liking, because I want to get myself prepared for Western States, which, according to my Training Peaks, is 7 weeks away. Just excited about that. So, so training's rolling along, feeling good. Legs seem to be recovering well from the mileage. So I'm very happy about that. So continue to progress there. No updates, no new stuff from the Western States front. I have two athletes that are running or were running the Tahoe 200, which was postponed to July. So, things are being affected out there. I had two athletes run in canyons, and that course was affected, especially the 100-mile. One of my guys ran the 100-miler. And, so, obviously things are being affected out in the Tahoe, Auburn area. So, excited to see what opportunity we have out there. Just kind of getting in my head, what it's going to be. And I'm going to start my heat training protocol here soon, start getting in the sauna. The track season is winding down, so I'll have a little bit more free time so I can get over there to the sauna. A few days I'll probably just run while I'm there and then just hop in the sauna right afterwards to get the most benefit from it. But yeah, all that stuff's coming up. It's crazy that it's come to that point. I'm excited. Obviously it's crazy. So, trying to stay healthy, trying to be mindful of, doing the ancillary things, taking care of my ankle, been doing my exercises, at least twice a week. It's been a little bit tough lately just with everything going on. Yesterday I missed a strength session, which, obviously it's one of the first things that we miss as runners, when things are just super busy. We had our conference meet yesterday and I just couldn't seem to find time to squeeze it in. I was already getting up early to get some work done and get my run in and all that stuff. So, sometimes it's just, we miss it, and we have to give ourselves grace and, try to make it up at some other point if it makes sense or if it's something you feel beneficial. So, anyhow, I appreciate that athletes continue to reach out. I will have a few spots coming up here as Hellbender comes to a conclusion. I'll have a few athletes taking a break, so I will have a few spots opening up. So if you're training for early fall or a fall race and want to talk about coaching, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to do so. Do through any communication that are in the show notes. Feel free to reach out in any which way. Keep those questions coming too. Really enjoy hearing from you and what questions you have and topics you'd like discussed. That really, it's nice, because I feel like it's something you want to hear. So please reach out about those things. I want to thank John once again for coming on, for sharing his story. And I want to thank you guys for listening and being a part of this podcast. If you can, share it on your podcast channel. Share it to friends, anybody you feel might be beneficial. If you can like it, rate it, all those things help. I really appreciate that. Patreon supporters, I continue to thank you for your support, for allowing me to keep doing this. If you can support on Patreon, that link is in the show notes. Still fundraising for Vermont and Leadville. The goals have been reached, but that doesn't mean we can't still help these challenged athletes. So if you feel that you are in a position to help out and want to donate, the 2 links are in the show notes. The Vermont Adaptive, obviously, that goes to the Vermont 100, and the challenged athletes of the Vermont Adaptive. And then there's the Challenged Athlete, which is my Leadville fundraiser, which is more of a West Coast-based program, but the monies go to a very worthy cause. So if you are in the position to donate, I continue to thank you for being a part of that. As I said, it has become a great part of my why, and just continues to grow and strengthen me. So thank you all for being a part of that, for being a part of this. So until next time, keep running, my friends.